Alright guys, I'm going to fly this with the regular ducts from the Cloud 149. You can see here, these are the pentablade props. Just to show you guys that this thing does perform great with these standard ducts as well. I mean, like, since the StanFPVs are so hard to keep in stock right now, nobody really buys this thing without the StanFPV ducts, because that's what I flew in the original video. So here we go with this video, with this set of ducts. Alright, so immediately
No matter where I go, there are planes, trains, and automobiles, and animals too, making all sorts of noise, making it difficult for me to convey information. Also, it's oddly still difficult for me to convey information and fly at the same time. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of this prop and what it's really intended for and everything about it, so that you can make up your mind if it's worth your time to give it a shot. So this is the 5-blade Gemfan ducted prop, and it's intended to be run inside a duct. And it's important to make that distinction because 5-blade props, even 6-blade props, are nothing new. They kind of come and go every couple of years. They're not really useful for much other than the fact that they are genuinely quieter for a number of reasons, which I'm not totally sure of, but I think one of them might be the fact that you just generate more drag, so the prop is just not spinning as fast, so it just can't generate as much noise. Anyways, this prop is designed to be operated inside a duct, and the reason why it exists is because Gemfan was trying to make a prop that is better at lifting heavy CineWhoops. Now, back up for a second. Gemfan has been doing a fantastic job of making props that are intended to be used for a particular purpose. And the reason why that's so great is because you get a prop that's really good for its intended purpose instead of kind of a general use prop that can be used for so many things. This is no different than that, what they're trying to do. This prop is really intended for heavier loads to lift. Like, it's made to lift heavier loads, and the way it does that is by generating more static thrust. And again, important to make that distinction that it's generating more static thrust, as in a hover state or a slow moving state, like what a CineWhoop does. The way it does that is by having more blades, and actually the actual blade itself is not only wider but also more aggressive, which is really interesting to me because I would expect it to be less aggressive and thinner because it's got more blades. Anyways, it does genuinely produce more thrust earlier in the RPM range. Now, Gemfan themselves say that this prop is intended for 2700 to 2900 kV motors on around 4S, but I put on some 3600 kV motors and it was totally fine. But I would say that above about 65-70%, it was drawing significantly more amps than I would have expected it to draw if it was on a tri-blade or the tri-blade version of this prop. So if you are running higher kV, it's totally fine, works great, and it does still generate that more thrust earlier in the RPM range, but just be aware that it does draw more amps higher up in the throttle range, and I'll get to efficiency in a second. But the extra thrust that it starts generating sooner in the RPM range, that one advantage is also its main disadvantage, because if you're running a quad that is not really super heavy, or at least 550 grams and above, then the throttle does become a little touchy, or either if it's not heavy enough or if your kV is a little too high. The throttle does become a little touchy because you are generating more thrust earlier in the RPM range, and so you're generating more thrust in a compressed window of throttle range. So it's really not intended to be used for really light loads or everything that's not what it's intended to be used for. So I would say don't use it unless you're at least above 520 grams, or if you're running lower kV, or if you're running lower voltage, particularly 3S. Now, the second half of this video is this quad flying on 3S, and this video that you're watching right now is the CineSplore flying on the basic ducts that it comes with. Now, almost nobody bought the basic ducts. Everybody got the StanFPV ducts, and the frame doesn't even sell without the StanFPV ducts, which is kind of crazy, but I'm flying it here with the basic ducts to show you guys that it does fly totally fine with the basic ducts. The advantage of the StanFPV ducts is that you do get a little bit better overall throttle and altitude control, and a little bit better control overall, like movement control, as well as slightly lower and reduced noise. And the noise is one other area where this prop does excel a little bit. It's not a lot quieter, but it is a little bit quieter, and that also has to do with the efficiency conversation. So the efficiency from this prop is very similar to that of the tri-blade. It's actually not a whole lot less efficient. I'm only getting maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds less flight time, and that's actually really impressive, but it's because it's designed to operate inside a duct. Now, one of the biggest advantages to ducts is the fact that they separate the airflow coming off the prop with the airflow going into the prop, basically the top from the bottom. And by doing that, you eliminate the vortices coming off the edges of the blade, which mix the flow of thrust with the air coming into the prop. And that increases your efficiency. And it also gives you the ability to run more blades because you don't have that issue of increased drag from the blade tips. Now, the ducts that we're running on these CineWhoops are not perfect ducts. In fact, they're very imperfect ducts, very, very imperfect. So imperfect that there's arguments from people whether they even have duct-like effects. But I can tell you that the ones that I'm showing you here, and with these motors and these props and this sort of setup, I'm definitely feeling some sort of duct-like effect. So it's definitely got something going on there. And so the reason why you still get some inefficiency with more blades, not only because it is harder to spin, but it's also because the ducts are less duct-like. They're not like full ducts. You still have some gaps between the duct and the blade. In a true duct, the blades should just about be scraping the edge of the duct so that you don't have any losses from that increased space. On that same note, these particular props are also 1 millimeter wider than the previous tri-blade version. They come in at 2.99 grams. And that puts them closer to the duct walls, kind of a little too close for comfort. And in all my quads, or the 3 quads that I tried it on, it was actually scraping the duct walls, which is actually not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing for the prop to kind of grind itself in place. It means it's at least very close to the duct on some portion of the rotation, which is a very positive thing. So pop them in, let them grind themselves out. They'll stop making those whining noises and it'll fly fine. What else do I have to say? Oh yeah, the 3S flight of this quad with the StanFPV Ducts with these 5-blade props is the quietest I have heard any CineWhoop. Now that's a 510 gram all of weight CineWhoop with a Hero 8 with these 5-blade props on 3450 kV 2203 motors and a 3S 1100 milliamp battery. We actually just got those batteries in. And that's really great. If you can get your quad below 500 grams with all that setup, you're going to have a really, really quiet quad. So while Gemfan recommends the prop to be operated in a certain operating range, you can operate it however you want. And I'm clearly demonstrating here that it is very, very nicely operatable within those parameters. The battery that I'm running in the 3S flight is brand new. We just got it. Actually, GMB has never made this particular kind of battery pack, which is their highest C-rated 1100 milliamp cell in a 3S configuration. And it's very special because it performs really nicely on the CineSplore, on the 4Ride, and on the PowerPick. So look for that. That's about it. Floss your teeth, and you can listen to the rest of the nonsense I'm saying while trying to fly and talk at the same time. So take care. Thanks for watching.
Go with a little bit more battery, but really, why? Do you need more than 3 minutes of flight time? And this is like 3 minutes of actual cruising flight time, CineWhoop style cruising, which is really no problem for this thing. Okay, so I'm going to fly for the full 3 minutes, but I'm going to talk more about CineWhooping. So I'm running EMU flight, and I have my dynamic rates on, and dynamic rates makes it really squishy and smooth. I'm flying smooth still, but the squishiness of the dynamic rates just helps smooth things out quite a bit more. So these are the StanFPV Ducts, and you guys are really excited about the StanFPV Ducts, but after this flight, I'm going to do another flight with the standard ducts to show you guys that standard ducts work fine on this thing as well. You don't need to have the StanFPV Ducts. Don't you just love those trash dumpsters? It's the definition of LA. Okay, so let's start talking about CineWhooping flying. So not only are you going really smooth, you're supposed to go really slow. I'm actually going, I think, a little bit quicker than generally you'd like to go with a CineWhoop, and you usually fly at really, really low camera angles, and you kind of work more on positioning the quad for the shot rather than trying to do some interesting moves. But there are some interesting moves that can be done, primary of which being the yaws. So if you go around something and you yaw, okay, this is like not a good review. It's not a good discussion, but I'm going to be doing flying tutorials around CineWhooping and around any other kind of flying. Let's just finish this flight out, actually flying around. And there you have it. That is roughly the flight time